Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you all?
Good.
Good. My name is Janelle. Please excuse my tardiness for being here. We are located in Harlem, in the city, so I'm rushing over here to make that speak, and we're also having an event tonight that I have rushed back to get back. But I'm so thankful to be here and glad that we were able to get me in. I am coming from GEMS, Girls Educational and Mentoring Services. I remember some of you are reading Rachel's book. Is that correct? Very young girls. I'm sorry, girls like us. Girls like us. Think of a documentary. Did anyone read the book? Solid? I don't want you to get in trouble, so don't raise everybody else's hand. So that is a book of the memoir of our CEO founder, Rachel Lloyd, who founded GEMS 16 years ago now on the basis of we serve girls and young women ages 12 through 24 who have been victims of commercial sexual exploitation and domestic trafficking. Is everyone aware of what those particular terms are that I'm speaking of? It's the first one. And you can just pause it. Thank you. Somebody give me an idea of what you feel like commercial sexual exploitation is, or what it sounds like. Yes. Absolutely. There you go. And it's the buying, and not just females, but males, as well as transgender youth as well. So this issue not only affects girls and young women, but transgender youth and boys as well. But at GEMS, because we're Girls Educational and Mentoring Services, we service girls and young women. So we deal with girls and young women 12 through 24 who've been in the life. So the life is the terminology that we use to describe the commercial sex industry. Okay? Somebody else give me something that you feel that domestic sex trafficking is. We kind of had the definition of what we thought commercial sexual exploitation is, but what is domestic sex trafficking? First word, domestic, what does that mean? Home. So here. So it's happening here in the States, here in the country, here in the United States, and here in Jersey, right? What does sex trafficking mean? Buying and selling of other people, right? So very similar. So what this issue is, that's what we deal with victim of. And not just the commercial piece of the domestic sex piece, but also sexual exploitation. And what I want to show you all before I even get into what GEMS is a clip called Making of a Girl. And it really, because this is a particular training and speaking that I do, I actually have to fly out next week, 3 days. I usually spend 3 days talking about this issue. So I got about 30 minutes. So I wanted to give you all a clip to really give you a visual of what I'm about to share with you all today. And this is narrated by our founder, Rachel Lloyd, and she's going to walk you through a life and kind of what leads young people into being recruited into the life, and kind of explain about what that looks like. So it's about 5 minutes, and then I'll go in after that. Can we turn the light?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
You're 12 years old and you're living with your moms, and your mom's is struggling because she didn't think that life was really going to work out like this for her, and she doesn't have a man around, and the men that are around haven't always been that great. Sexual abuse is becoming kind of normal for you, and you think that other people don't have secrets that are as bad as you, and maybe you tried to talk to somebody at school and they haven't really heard you, or maybe they just haven't had time to listen to you. And so you're seeing these girls on the videos, and they're so pretty and they're so sexy, and so your way at 12 of escaping into this fantasy world is to think about what it must be like to be one of these girls, and you know that adult men already look at you, and you wonder how you can kind of use that.
I was just a child, and that's how I was supposed to live, like a child, like an adult.
So one one day you're coming out of school and there's a guy outside in a Cadillac and he's nice looking. I mean, he's got the baseball cap and the jeans and the Timbs, and he tells you how pretty you are and you know how pretty your hair looks, and it's been a while since anybody even really noticed anything about you. And for the first time, you feel like somebody's really interested in you, because now all of a sudden he's asking you about your dreams and your hopes and where your father's at, and he says that he can be a daddy to you.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was depending on for support.
And so that night he takes you to a club and he puts you up on the stage and he gives you a few drinks and there's men throwing dollars at you and it's scary, but all the time you're just looking at his face in the back of the room and he's like, you know, go ahead baby girl, go ahead, you're doing it for daddy. And you're feeling proud because nobody's ever said that to you. And so then that night he tells you that there's more stuff that you've got to do, and he takes you into a room and there's a man there and he tells you to strip and you think this is something you'll never do, and yet there's a part of you that already knew how to do this because that's what your stepfather's been doing to you all these years before. And so you turn that trick and it's like a part of you has died inside. And so you come out of the club that night and you get in the car and you know he's pumping 50 cents and he takes you to McDonald's and he tells you you did a good job tonight, sweetie. And he's stuffing his pockets with the $1,000 that you made. And right now, you're happy.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was depending on for support.
And you feel like this is the best that it's ever going to get. And everything else in your life has prepared you for this moment. All the sexual abuse, or the neglect, or the drama, or the pain, or the trauma has prepared you for tonight where you stepped across a line and you always thought you'd never really quite step across. And you don't realize that night what it will be like to be on the track and get raped. And you don't realize that daddy isn't really going to protect you. You don't realize what it's like to have a gun held to your head that night. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you catch your first STD. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you first come home and daddy beats you for the first time because you didn't make enough money. You don't know what it's going to be like to have cops offer to trade sex with you in exchange for not being arrested. And then sometimes you'll do that and they'll still lock you up anyway. You don't know what it's like to sit up in jail and know that you just made $1,500 for your pimp last night, but he won't come down and put $200 bail on just to get you out a few days early. You don't know what it's like to walk down the street at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're just getting off work and people are starting their day and they see you and they know what you do and they look at you in a way that you just don't feel like you belong in that world anymore. And you don't know what it's like to feel like you've lost part of yourself along the way and to feel like you'll never leave. And no matter how many times you try to leave, he'll always find you and catch you. But that night, all you care about is the fact you're riding in a Cadillac, and you're eating McDonald's, and you're listening to 50, and you got this one man who you really think loves you sitting right by your side.
The reason why I show that clip is because it says a lot that I can say within the short time period, right? To really give us a true understanding of what we're talking about right now. Some of the key things that Rachel spoke about was some of the terms in the life, right? The life, like I spoke about, is a terminology that we use to describe the commercial sex industry. It's a life separate from everyday life that everyone else deals with. You eat differently, you sleep differently, your structure of life is differently, the rules are different. And it's called the game as well, so it interchangeably says the life and the game. There's rules to the game, there's rules to this life, right? So, and it's also what she spoke about the daddy. Oftentimes, our girls and young women, when they have a pimp or an exploiter, they use the term daddy, right? It's a very skewed ship of just like family, right? Even the girls and young women in the house, they're their folks. That's my folks, that's my wife-in-law. These are terms that are often used to kind of describe that family structure that's there, right? And often she also spoke about some of the precursors in that continuum that really puts young people at risk, right? She spoke about having a single-parent household, having that low self-esteem, having somebody showing you love or concern or compassion that you never experienced before. And here comes a man who kind of feels and kind of understands what you're missing and says that I can promise you all of this and I'll give you all of this, but if you do this for me. So when they spoke about the common age of entry into the life, that's what it is, right? So that's why we work with 12 and 24, recognizing that our younger girls have entered into this, but also our older girls who are 20 plus, 30 plus, have been in a life for a while, and understanding what that looks like. So when we term it commercial sexual exploitation, it's to put the services there. It's to really understand that this is a victim-centered approach and not a victimless, right? The term prostitution has been used for years, and it has been known as a victimless crime, like one of the oldest trades going on, right? Not understanding the reality that happens and how it's often somebody recruiting and leading someone into this, right? We spoke about the various forms of what this is. So if we're speaking about commercial sexual exploitation, we're talking about the exchange or promise thereof of monetary goods. So I can promise you that I'm going to pay you, or promise you for a place to stay, or promise you that I'll give you clothing, right? So that commercial piece, so we're talking about that buying piece. When we move into domestic sex trafficking, oftentimes when we think of trafficking, we think of movement, right? Often when we hear of sex trafficking, we think of that's international, Thailand, Philippines, over there. It can't be happening. When we're located in Harlem, we've been in Harlem for 16 years, and we service girls and young women across all 5 boroughs. Here in Jersey, girls come to us. We have girls coming to us from Florida, Georgia, everywhere, right, of understanding what this issue is. So domestic sex trafficking is defined as when a third party is profiting off of someone else. So the moment, and I'll give you all examples. Say, and I'll give you 3, sexual exploitation without the commercial piece. We're talking about the imbalance of power. So say, for instance, I give you a young woman who's 15, right, starts dating this man who's about 30, 35, meets him at the mall, right, he's taking her to dinner, buying her clothing, not requiring anything from her, but at 15, she really doesn't have much to give him back but sex, right? That's sexual exploitation. That's that imbalance of power. So say, for instance, that same young woman gets into a fight with her parents or whomever's at home, gets kicked out of the home, now doesn't have a place to stay. Now that same man is like, okay, you can stay with me, but now you have to sleep with me. So now he's telling her, I will give you a place to stay in order for you to sleep with me. That's when we're talking about the commercial piece. Say that same man calls his buddies and his friends who are just like, look, I got a girl in my house, you know, I broke her in already, she's good to go. You can sleep with her too if you pay me. That's when we start talking about that domestic sex trafficking piece. Did she have to leave the home? Did I say did she have to leave in order? Absolutely not. So it's not always movement. And because I do this training across the nation, we often deal with states who have like intersections and routes and trucking routes and things and such. And sometimes it does involve movement. But as we're dealing with our girls and young women in New York City and here in Jersey, it's happening in hotel rooms. It's happening in basement apartments. You don't have to leave. And the way that technology is, various forms of exploitation goes as follows. So you have the trap. So that's the street exploitation. That's oftentimes the perception of what we hear when we see women walking down in that time, right? We also have strip clubs. Oftentimes people don't feel like stripping is a form of exploitation, but often it is. And that's actually a really recruiting hub that I'll go back to in a moment. We also have online. So there are a lot of websites geared for escorting, massage parlors, different things like that. Particular websites that people go to purchase family members, right? There's also various forms where we talk about that guerrilla style pimping that oftentimes people hear, like that violence and that force that comes on. But what we know is it can start off with that seduction and coercion piece. That I love you, you're beautiful, I got anything that you're missing, I can provide, right? So then we get to that component. But then later on, that violence and force serves as a technique to kind of keep them there at that time. Kidnapping is also a form how people are recruited into the commercial sex industry. Online enticements. So even discuss things such as Facebook and Instagram and Kik and all of these other various things that happen have been platforms that people have used to recruit people. People are even using dating websites to bring in people into the commercial sex industry. And like I spoke of before, this not only happens to girls, but boys as well. And also transgender youth. Because now I'll go into some communities where they'll say, you know, well, this is not an urban community, this is not a city area, we don't have it. And I talk about it, I'm like, do you have a homeless population? Especially homeless young people? Oh yeah, we have that. Do we have services for them? Well, no. Well, then how are they surviving on the streets? What's going on? So oftentimes we hear this term as survival sex. Like, I have to change in sex for a place to stay, for food to eat, and for clothing to wear. So we even speak about homelessness. We talk about the issue of identifying an LGBTQ community. What does that look like? What are the support services for that? We talk about poverty, sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. You saw the statistics, 70 to 90% of people involved in the commercial sex industry have a history of child sexual abuse. At gyms, our girls and young women have the higher end of that, right? We did an entire before monologues that we kind of put on a production of like, what does issue mean? And kind of all the various ways where school officials, police officers, other family members could have intervened, right? And some of the areas where recruiting happens, some things are very close to strip clubs or other places. Port Authority is huge, but it's also next to one in Covenant House, which is a large homeless youth population. So you see the correlation there. Magic City, anybody ever heard of Magic City?
Yeah.
Right? Magic City is up the street a couple blocks away from their Greyhound bus station. So somebody who has run away, they don't know where they're going, they get off there, and they're getting off the bus station, they're looking around like, what do I do? Exploiters can be like, oh yeah, I have a way for you to make money. Magic City that has been glorified for years is a good way for you to make it, right? And I can profit off of that. So there are various ways that this affects the community and various things that we do. Kind of backing it up to what we do at GEMS, we deal with the holistic approach, right? So our girls and young women come in and we have a victim survivor leader model, right? Understanding and letting them know that you've been a victim of a crime. This is not just something that's just willy-nilly. This is a crime that has been committed against you, right? And so our girls and young women under 18, we have a lot more leeway for this because everyone knows, oh, it's a minor, everyone's on board, sex trafficking, but it's our girls and young women over 18 that's a little bit different. And we have what is called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, the TVPA, which is the federal law for adult women, right? So we perform case management. We have education initiative. As you all know, education is so important, so important. And that's actually one of the programs that I tend to try to run groups in because it is that important. And we go in, whether they're going back for their GED, they're going back for traditional school, they're getting enrolled in post-secondary programs. We're trying to be that support, right? One of our young women just got accepted into a pre-med program, right? So being able to know when services are put there, it's available, right? Options are available for you. We do youth leadership, we have 2 residential housing facilities, but we also work toward long-term housing. A lot of our girls and young women come in with children, right? So that impact not only children that they have, but if they had a child with their pimp and exploiter, what does that mean when they try to leave the life? What does that mean when they have that connection that he's like, you take my child, and I'll take you to court. And guess what? She has a case. Because usually the girls and young women have been picked up on charges. Any gun charges, any drug charges, anything he's put on her. So now she has to deal with that. And he's kind of sitting in the back like, I wasn't part of that. But now since all of the laws and things have changed, we've come a long way in the movement. A long way, right? So I do want to paint a picture differently with you all when talking about language. And I want you all to be extremely honest with me when I give you these terms. If I tell you, if I say child teen prostitute, what comes to mind? Just throw out some terms.
Young girls.
Young girls, preteen, what else? Huh? What else? No, I want you to be real with me. And if there's no judgment, this is a safe space. I want you to, I'm asking you that for a reason.
Whore.
House girl, drop out, what else?
Whore.
Whore?
Yeah.
Yes. Hoe, slut, thought? Yeah. Yeah. Let's come on. What else? What else? What else? What else comes to mind? What else comes to mind? How do they look? How do we tend to think of a child teen prostitute?
They don't got a daddy. That's a father figure.
They don't have a father figure. They don't have home. They don't have people that care about them. They like it. They make money. Right? It's glamorized. It's disgusting, some people think of, right? So this is the perception oftentimes when you hear child teen prostitute. Right? It's a very heavy weight. So in turn, if I say, what comes to mind when I say commercially sexual exploited child? A commercial sexual exploitation. What comes to mind then? How do we perceive someone?
A girl that's been exposed.
Someone has been exposed, right? What else? Victim. Yep. What else? Someone has been deceived. They've been tricked. They've been kidnapped, captured. What else? Manipulated. Yep. They seem kind of trapped. What else? Being forced. Absolutely. You see how the terms change? But the same young person, that's the same young person I'm talking about. The same issues that is happening with them exploited is that same child teen prostitute that society we kind of look at like, that's nasty. She's gross, she did that. That's her choice. But then when we use terminology such as commercial sexual exploitation, we begin to shift our mindset. Now we're thinking they're trapped. It's not a choice, they're a victim. And now we begin to have services. So that's why it's so important. And you all should know now, is language important in our society? Absolutely. How we frame things is important. So when we say that child teen prostitute, and they're often called now thoughts, right? Not just the jokes where the thought clothing and thought jobs and thought cars, but it's literally, they're like, it's that whole over there, that whole out there. So now they're holding this weight of just like, how am I ever supposed to get out of this situation when all you see me as is this prostitute? You don't see me as the man who's been sexually abusing me since I was 3. You don't see me as this man who told me he loved me, but then put me out in the strip club and told me to make money for him. You don't see all the rapes that I've been through. You don't see me getting beat every day. You don't see officers arresting me and still trying to have sex with me. Like, you don't see that. But when you hear the term commercial sexual exploitation, you see that. You see me as a victim. You see me as somebody that did this because I didn't have any other way out. I didn't have the resources and support. So that is something that I wanted to convey to you all today. As you all are researching and getting in the movement of understanding that there are so many other social ills that are really pouring into the commercial sex industry. Right? It doesn't happen under an umbrella. But we talk about issues such as classism, racism, and sexism. Talk about that living in a society where females are very highly sexualized. Living in a society where the way your success is determined is by your zip code. That oftentimes you don't have the advantages that other people in other zip codes have. We talk about Hunts Point in the Bronx. There's been a lot of different HBO things talking about, you know, the life on the point and things as such. That is it's like one of the lowest congressional areas in the U.S. Highly impoverished, high areas of homelessness, substance abuse issues, and very high prevalence of the commercial sex industry. So we talk about not only the pimps and exploiters, but we talk about the girls who were born in Hunts Point that we work with, grew up in Hunts Point. The men who are the exploiters and the pimps also grew up in Hunts Point. So they've also been exposed to this lifestyle. They've also been exposed to the means in their life, and they're like, what else do I do? Same thing when we talk about turning to drug dealing and gang banging and things of such. What's shown to you is kind of that path and that continuum that goes through. So talking about if we're not addressing those huge issues, the commercial sex industry will remain prevalent. Okay? So So that is something that I wanted, the reality of this. And it touches home, and it's something that is important that as we're all getting knowledge about and we're all contributing to, and to understanding that we never know, right? GEMS, we have survivor staff as well as ally staff, right, of able to come together and to know that, look, you have examples that we made it. You made it, right? You made it out of that life. You made it, and you're great. And then you also have ally staffs who haven't gone through the life, but have a heart for it, right? They have a heart to help and to serve and to do a lot of things, so the combination helps. So like you said, we're moving victim, survivor, leader. Identifying as a victim, empowering as a survivor, and ultimately moving to leader position. Like I said, we have across the nation, we have doctors and nurses and scientists and professors and business owners of women who have all been in a life, but have survived and are now leaders in the movement. So it's possible, and I want you all to know it is possible. But with the right services, the support, and the acknowledgement is extremely important. You all are at crucial ages where you have that awareness, and you can start spreading it around. All right? But I want to take some questions. And no question is too, you can talk to me, this is why we come out here. So questions, what's on your mind? Yes?
Do you do an internship?
Yes, we actually do. We do in-house internships, so we have our girls and young women, when they go through program, they do them, and we also have internships from colleges that come into. Yeah. I actually just trained one of the new ones. Yes? I got a side hand over there. Okay. What other questions? Yes? That's a good question. We have now what's called the Safe Harbor Law. So that means that any young person, whether girl, boy, transgender youth, is picked up on charges of prostitution and they're under the age of 16, sadly, because 16 in New York, you're recognized as an adult. So if you're picked up on crimes of prostitution and you're under the age of 16, they don't arrest you anymore and detain you. They now send you to other services. So they'll send them to gyms. We have a ATI, Alternative to Incarceration program. So we have court advocates at each of the courts who are advocating for those services. We also are really working with the courts as far as adult women who are picked up, so considered 16 and over. We also have court advocates who are also in those courts in all 5 of our boroughs who are advocating, like, if they've been picked up, let's kind of see if we can get them some services versus giving them jail. That's a good question. And all the states have different either sex trafficking laws, such as Safe Harbor, or some type of sex trafficking provision that applies to that process. Yes.
Since our goal is to create awareness in our community for human trafficking, and I'm sure a lot of students, the first time they're learning about this, probably have heard of it happening. What's your recommendation for us to spread awareness of the best way to go about it individually, like telling a friend and getting them interested? Since you work for an organization that do a lot of that, what advice would you give to each individual student here?
That is my primary goal. As one of the speakers and the trainers, that's what I do all day, every day, as I do this. One of the things that are tools that are really great in helping is the conversation. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to have these conversations. I have to have them with my family and friends all the time, especially my male friends. It's very difficult for them to understand because it's become so normalized in our communities. So it's very difficult, so understanding that. Also showing clips, like this is on YouTube, Making of a Girl. So if you all want to show that, you can show that. That's available to you. Having conversations and kind of understanding, like when we think of like stripping and when we think of these things and we're like, oh, is there choice and their choice? Kind of coming back with some pushback and it's just like, can we maybe say it's lack of choices? Can we maybe say, like, if you had an option to go to school for a full ride and have parents and family in your life that care, would you actually choose something like that? Right? I always tell my friends who are always like, yeah, I can't do what you do. I don't have the power and I don't have to do that. I'm like, check in on the kids in your family, right? Making sure that they're okay, making teacher, whatever social media aspects that they have, that they're understanding when befriending people they don't know, right? Taking rides from people they don't know. Talking about what does low self-esteem look like in our young people. Because that's what exploiters feed upon, of how can they fill those voids. Checking out, you know, even talking about things such as child sexual abuse. I actually went and I spoke at a panel full of parents, and I was like, as parents, we got to be able to allow our kids to talk to us about certain things like that, and when they tell us they've gone through, we have to be able to address it. So I think being able to have these conversations, and it can be, and I'm not going to say it's easy, because you have the music, you have, you know, I was talking to one of my hairstylists, and like, it was an entire summer where I felt like stripping was in every song. So me trying to talk about this issue when every song is about stripping and stripping and stripping, and I'm being a stripper and all this other stuff, it was very difficult. But then having to pinpoint and just saying, if that young woman had another choice, what would she do? That is somebody's daughter, that's someone's child. And that's actually what I am able to do to get to other men. So having those conversations is important. Also, I think if you all, we have a documentary called Very Young Girls. I'm not sure if you all have viewed it. That speaks volumes by itself. If y'all like, you know what, it's a lot going on, let's do this. I actually made my friends sit and watch this documentary just so they can get it, and they kind of saw it because it was someone that they can see within themselves. And they were able to kind of understand, like, man, this is happening right here around the block. This is happening right here. So it really shifted that. Yes. We do not. We're gender responsive, so we have all female staff, except for one who's in bookkeeping, and he's awesome. But we're gender responsive, so we respond. And it's also showing healthy relationships with women. So we do that because in the life, another woman is your competition. So for the girls and young women to see healthy relationships with women and to know that we can love on each other and not compete for things is important. Boys, there are specific organizations that will deal with boys. We have Streetworks and Safe Horizons, and those are some of the organizations that deal with boys. Okay? Yes.
For some of the women who are not very motivated in the child, who are self-defined, what kind of techniques do you use to help them stay out of that?
We're talking about who haven't been in the life yet, but preventive-wise,
No,
they have been in the life. That's kind of how our holistic approach is. What does that look like? Counseling, what does that look like to kind of help support in that aspect? Because it can be, I mean, that's one of the continuums that we need people into the life, is that previous history of abuse. So we do have programming that addresses that previous abuse, and what does that look like presently in their life, and how to heal in that. I know you all have to go. I do apologize, I was over. I'll be around for like the next 15, 20 minutes, so if you want to come in and ask me something personally, feel free. I am going to give you all my email address, so if you have anything, email me directly, Jenia, Jenia, @gems-girls.org. So any questions that you don't feel comfortable coming up to me and asking, you email them to me and I'll be willing to ask. But I'm an open book and I'll tell them.
She not finished. She is not finished talking. So we know how we operate. Technically speaking, we know how we roll, right? We weren't Harvard over the last few days. That is not. Did that happen in Harvard? No. Thank you. And it's not going to happen at Passaic. Continue.
Thank you. I mean, that's awesome. I like that structure, even sorry. But I know you all are right time sensitive. I just say I want to thank you for having an interest in this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for you all going into your friends and your families and advocates and awareness about this issue, because it's important and we all have a role to do with it. So thank you all.
And we certainly thank you from the EOF. Thank you. And let me just say this. This is the beginning if you've been listening to anything that we've been sharing since you've been through some program, this is the beginning of networking opportunities. So if you're a serious student, you asked, for example, you asked about internships and opportunities. This is how you begin to develop professional networks in college. This is how resumes become a moot point. Am I right?
Absolutely.
We just need to send one up to human resources because I'm calling the name of that. Because you have the vote. Am I right? Thank you. Right? That's how it works.
And can I just add on to what Mr. Bryan is saying? The reason we had such a great speaker here today is through networking. I met Ms. Brown at an affair that I was hosting, and she was on the panel and did such a great job that I knew then that we would need her here and that she could really work to help us understand more about what was going on. So I just called her, put her in touch with AES&J, and they took it from here. But this started from networking.
That's right. And networking makes everything happen. The credential is just a byproduct of the networking opportunities. Figure that out when you have the opportunity.
They'll get on it.
You'll learn. Okay. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.